Ready when you are, CB. Do I start in Canada or Mexico?
It's me and Animal Kingdom.
You really hate us? This is Theme Park Thursday with Dillos Diz. She is Jen.
Hello.
And I am Frank, and we are here with another great guest this week. This kind of has been the year of just incredible guests, reconnections, new connections, and this week is no different. He is the author of the book Marketing the Magic, Behind the Scenes, Business Strategies from Walt Disney World. We have a lot of Walt Disney World to get into here, but we also want to hear about him and this media conglomerate he has created for himself. I love it so well. I see his posts all the time on LinkedIn. So please welcome in. It's Rob Anspach. Hello, Rob.
How you doing? This is great to be here.
Appreciate it. We were talking offline here about your recent trip, and I definitely want to incorporate that recent Walt Disney World trip into the mix here as we talk about your book. But we got connected back in February on LinkedIn, and I was happy to get an advanced copy of the book and provide a little feedback. So I thought I would dive right in, and I know you want to bring it up too, because I was really taken to. Jen and I talk about FOMO all the time, and we see people we know who are in Walt Disney World or Disney parks, or people meeting up and having a good time. So you have a nice spin on it where I called it the crossroads of where FOMO meets JOMO. And that's really a big thing in your book there. So I thought maybe just we could lead right into that, because I know that was my hook. And then we can get into a little bit about you, but I wanted to hook the overall.
Well, Disney is the master at FOMO. They get everybody to want to buy the Genie Plus or the Lightning Lane or the special pins or the commemorative, Instagram worthy, desserts. And I've taken a different approach because I've seen the people that come in, and I've been a huge Disney fan since I was, I don't know, very young. And my first visit to Disney Disney World was 1985. So I was about 16 years old. And so going back to this FOMO, Disney is the master at doing this. And here's the thing is that if you're going to Disney for 1 day or 2 days and you want to get everything in and you want to have that special experience, sure, get sucked into the FOMO. Buy everything, buy the $300 lightsabers and the, but I've been to the park so many times, and I know a lot of people down in Florida go, daily, or they got their annual passes. Practice JOMO, the joy of missing out, and I've never bought a Genie Plus. I've never bought a Lightning Lane, and people are like, well, Rob, how do you get on these rides if you're not spending the extra money? I take everything in stride.
Yeah.
Because I look at everything Disney's doing. And from a marketer standpoint, I love it. It's, people say, well, Rob, you're too old to go to Disney. I go to Disney to learn marketing, to learn, the like my book says, the behind the scenes, what Disney is doing and how can I bring that into my business. Now, as a marketer, I understand FOMO. I use it every day to try to entice my clients to buy the exclusive thing, to buy the thing that they're going to remember, maybe, hopefully, at least for 5 minutes, The problem is that you buy something, by the time you get to the parking lot, you're like, oh, what was it? Where'd all my money go? And now you have buyer's remorse. Right. I don't want that. Yeah. But Disney does it in such a way that people will spend their entire life savings and then go back the next year, do it all over again. And it's like, what? And my neighbor is a hater. I don't understand it. Well, how can you hate Disney? You got the legacy, you got everything that Disney's ever done. entice people, to educate people, to elevate people, and you got the haters. And I get it. You know, you go to Disney, whether you go to Animal Kingdom Lodge or Art of Animation, you stay within that Disney bubble, and you want everything perfect. And maybe that we've kind of been drawn into that fairy tale. Disney's going to deliver perfect. You have to lower your expectations. You do. You really do.
Yeah.
Because the people that work there, the cast members, although they're brilliant and you know, they want to give you that perfect holiday, that vacation, that time away. They're human. They're just like you. And yes, we as customers demand, hey, I'm spending my life savings. You need to give me a perfect holiday. You know, and I'm going to bust on the storybook dinner. You know, I love the characters. I loved the attention that I got when I was eating there. The food wasn't that great. You know, if anybody's ever gone to storybook for their character experience, not so much. The thing is that I still got, you know, pictures with Dopey and Grumpy and the Queen and I still had a good time.
Right.
And so when we think about Disney, we think about this perfect bubble that people are going to have their magical wishes and they leave, and it's not all that. But that's the problem, is that fear of missing out creates that expectation of perfect. And I think we need to back it down and say, look, have the joy of missing out. If you miss out, no big deal. There's so much more stuff to do at Disney. You know, and people are like, well, Rob, it's just the 4 parks. Oh my God, no. You got Disney Springs, you got mini golf, you can resort hop.
Right. All the things.
You know, we were just down for Easter. My wife and I, and we took my brother-in-law, his 2 little kids, and it was just perfect. The crowds had dissipated, so we got, you know, we did rope drop at Magic Kingdom and at Animal Kingdom. And, you know, for years, I just didn't do rope drop because I just think, you know, I'm going to go to the park when I want to go to the park. Oh, my goodness. Rope drop at Magic Kingdom. We hit probably 5 rides in a row. And it was just, I've never done that before. You know, so for me, it was like I was 16 again, and my little niece and nephew are like, what's with Uncle Rob? He's got more energy than us. And I'm 56 years old, and when I go to Disney, it's I'm a kid in a candy store again. You know, my wife is dragging behind. You know, but for me, I'm probably the poster child for marketers everywhere when it comes to Disney and the power of storytelling. You know, when I was 16 years old and I went to Disney World for the first time, it was only Magic Kingdom and Epcot. There was no Hollywood Studios. There was no Animal Kingdom. And I walked in it, and it was just this magical feeling that as soon as you get on Main Street and you see the castle, I thought, this is just great. And it gives you that euphoria, but you felt like you were at home at the same time. And I carried that forward for many, many years. And I took my family the first time to Disney World in 2000. And, you know, I had been an entrepreneur for about 5-6 years at that point. And I thought, this is success. When I can take my family, you know, to this wonderful experience, that was the ultimate entrepreneurial success story. And so we would go every 5 years up until about 2015, and after that it was every year.
That's
No,
awesome.
that's really awesome. Jen and I mean, Jen probably can speak to the idea of what we call Dilloing our
Yeah.
expectations. That's usually so that's something we've talked about openly over the years.
Yeah.
Jen's first year, also similar to you, Rob. That
Mhm.
1985 was your first visit.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jen, how would you define Dilloing expectations? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, everything you're saying, I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Especially, I like that you have given a name like Jomo to, because to me that speaks to us so much,
Mhm.
and I think we've kind of chalked it up to, oh well, we've just been so many times that we're okay if we don't get on a ride. We're okay
Right.
if we don't see a show or whatever it is. We'll be back. It's okay, and we've been plenty of times before. But also we have what we call pockets in the theme parks where we can just like, ooh, this is a good pocket where you can kind of just sit, take in the details, take in the
Mhm.
smells, take in the BGM, and just really enjoy Disney in a different way. And I
Mhm.
think JOMO is a great word for it. But for us, we often say Dillo the expectations because it's kind of a mix of things of setting the expectations appropriately so that we know we might not get on everything. We
Right.
might not see a fireworks show. It may downpour, whatever it is. Um, but it'll still be amazing because you're in Disney. So like
Yeah.
it's still so just don't set the expectations too high. And it is hard to balance out for people who have spent their life saving up for this amazing vacation and you want
Mhm.
it to all go perfect. It still can, just maybe not as you thought it would,
Right.
maybe one ride is down, but you got this character experience you weren't expecting or whatever it is. You have to kind of leave yourself open to anything that could happen.
Well, and also, yes, there's 4 parks and then 2 water parks. You don't have to do everything.
Yep.
The last couple times we've been down, we picked 2 parks. That's it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because honestly, you do 4 parks in 4 days. That's a lot of walking. Your
Yeah.
legs are going to be screaming at you. Your feet are probably going to slap you.
Yep.
No, it's pace yourself.
Mhm.
Do one day at Magic Kingdom, take a day off.
Yep.
Maybe go do Disney Springs. Maybe go do mini golf. Maybe resort hop, and then go do another park. It just because if you try to get it all in by the third day, you're so tired, you're aggravated, you're frustrated, you don't want to do any more Disney, and that's not the park way, you
Mhm.
know.
Right.
And that's not what Walt envisioned. Yeah, he wanted people going to his parks. He wanted people to have fun. But you ever watch people, especially people with kids?
Mhm.
I've taken my kids there too, and I've probably done this. Midway through the day, they haven't eaten, they haven't drank anything,
Yeah.
and then they explode on their kids. I spent all this money. You better get on a darn ride.
Mhm.
It's not fun,
Yeah.
No.
and it's not fun for everybody else to listen to.
Yeah.
So it's take your time.
Yeah.
You don't have to do everything. And the first time I got on Tron, that was my last time. I love Tron. I do. I
Mhm.
love
Yeah.
the
Right.
sci-fi adventure, but it put a big bruise on my chest, and I'm like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah. I'm
You know,
also done with Tron. So yeah. I'll sit on the bench with you and wait
yeah. So
on the people mover.
FOMO can do a lot of strange things to you,
Yeah.
and it'll make you want to do stuff.
Right.
But here's the thing: try it once.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for you, then go back to the Jomo.
Mhm.
And for me, I love breaking up the monotony of the day and getting on slow rides.
Mhm.
The People Mover, Carousel Progress, anything that gets me out of the sun
Yep.
Mhm.
and I can have a break for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Pirates is a good one too.
Yeah.
It just Guardians. I love the Guardians ride, although I got off and I felt like, where's the trash can? I gotta vomit.
You and Jen have a lot in
Same.
common.
But I didn't go to Epcot this year. I go to Epcot every couple of years.
Mhm.
It's a lot of walking.
Yeah.
And I I wrote this so people could understand that not everything that Disney does is going to resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you look at it from a marketer's perspective and you say, what can I take from Disney that they're using right now that I can put in my business?
Yeah.
What actions can I take to improve? You're going to find that your business does so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great segue. We kind of had a little thesis statement here at the beginning with the FOMO and JOMO. So, Rob, why don't you tell us about you, your history as a marketing guru, as it were, and kind of your own company here over the last couple of decades.
Well, I started as an entrepreneur back in 1995. I owned a carpet cleaning business in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I had that business for 19 years. And the first couple of years, I relied on newspapers and coupon clippers and to design my ads, which were awful. They looked just like everybody else's. And I thought, I can't continue to do this. By the third year, I was almost broke. And this was 1998. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I ended up seeing an ad for a marketing seminar in Arizona, and I went out and that was the spark. That was the lightning in the bottle that convinced me I need to learn marketing. I need to do all these things to improve what my business. And there was a gentleman there that I met. His name is Dan Kennedy, and he's like the godfather of direct response marketing. And Dan is a big Disney fan. And, I'll get to Dan in a bit, but, in the 19 years I had that cleaning business, I also started Anspach Media in 2001. And my first client was in North Carolina. I flew down and helped them and got things set up. And then 9/11 happened. And I thought, well, I have this local cleaning business, or I have this consulting business is just taking off.
Right.
And I put the consulting business on hold for a couple of years and focused all my attention on growing the carpet cleaning business. And after, I guess it was 2014, after my first book came out, I decided, I'm going to sell the cleaning business, focus more on the consulting. And I was making enough money at the consulting that I didn't care about the cleaning anymore.
Yeah.
And, I started writing books. I started teaching marketing to lawyers and doctors, and I was having fun, and I thought, I'm just going to write one book, be done with it. And that one book was called Share, and it was the easiest social media book you'll ever read. And, the following year, a buddy of mine, a former carpet cleaner, says, Rob, we should do a book on search engine optimization. I said, okay. So he's up in Canada. I'm in Pennsylvania. We're doing everything through Google Hangout. And we recorded it. I transcribed it, rewrote the book. And from concept to creation to #1 bestseller in 4 countries took 60 days.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I wrote another book called Lessons from the Dojo. And I thought, every page is going to be a new lesson, 101 ways. And I thought, I was just loving how this book was shaping up. And well, I scheduled the launch for October. Apparently at the same time, my wife and I were going on a church trip to Rome. So the book fizzled. Like 6 years for it to finally make money.
Oh my God.
And, but this book, Marketing the Magic, is like the 60th book that I've produced in 12 years.
Wow.
And Dan Kennedy sent me a Mickey card, thanking not only me for the book, but praised it and gave me a testimonial. It only took like 28 years to get that. But, it reminded me of Walt's early failures, because not everything that he did was a home run.
Yeah.
In fact, today, a lot of the movies are still not home runs.
Right.
You know, but out of all the books that I've done, not every one has been a home run.
Yeah.
But some people still like those books that didn't make me money. And they still take pictures posing with the books and they send them to me.
Right.
Which I then use on social media to promote the book or promote more books. And so, you know, a lot of the things that I do remind me of Walt and his struggles early on. Yeah. And I think every marketer needs to look at that. You know, everything that we do is not always a home run. In fact, some things will lose money.
Yeah.
You know, and so you look at Disney Corp now, and it's this giant, you know, media conglomerate that's in everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not everything that they do makes money, but it sure does make magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and what a full circle moment for you to have Dan write a testimonial, you know, like that's why you started and that's how far you had come, and who cares how long it took.
So, you know, I tell people, you know, I've been in this entrepreneurial journey for 30 years. I played the long game.
Yeah.
And I've, but back in October, my wife and I took my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law to southern France. And my wife's grandfather was from a little town called Ez, which is near Nice.
Okay.
And when you go to Ez, it's like this giant castle, you know, on the hill. There's a plaque, and it says Walt Disney was here, and tells everything about. And I'm like, darn, I am walking in Walt's footsteps. You know,
yeah.
And I've been to Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany, and Walt based that on his castles, and I thought, you know, this is pretty cool because a lot of the things that I'm doing now, subconsciously, I might have forgotten what Walt did.
Yeah.
But here I am doing them, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah. As you're writing all these books, when do you start to go, I really need to write one connecting what Disney is doing to what I'm doing and the lessons there? Like when
I was in France, I wrote my legacy book, and my legacy book, it was funny as I was writing this, I'm thinking back to all the books that I've helped others, and that connecting force was legacy.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm finishing up legacy. I published that in December. And I thought, who has the greatest legacy of them all? Disney.
Right.
But there's been so many books on Walt.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to make it just a Walt book.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it about, you know, Walt Disney World. Because I've been to Disneyland. And yes, it's smaller. And yes, there are some things that I really like about Disneyland. The Indiana Jones ride, the Blue Bayou restaurant. But by and large, it doesn't give me the same thrill as Walt Disney World. You know, I can go to Walt Disney World I could probably say every day and still learn new things.
Right.
But I've been there dozens of times and I still haven't seen everything. I haven't done everything. You know, and people's like, well, Rob, it's just a resort. Oh my God, no, it's more than that. You know, and I'll say, did you know you can go fishing at Disney World? I'm like, what? You know, and I'll throw out, you know, when the Grand Floridian builds the gingerbread houses, and people are like, oh, I didn't know that. and every time my friends are at Disney World, and I see that it's, you know, they're posting it on social. Did you do this? Did you do Flight of Passage? Do that? You know, oh no, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that? Best ride ever.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was, how do I take my excitement? You know, even though I'm 56, take that excitement of a 16-year-old and put it into a book to make it interesting, but also make it about marketing, which a lot of people that aren't entrepreneurs think is boring anyway.
Yeah.
So how do I mix them? How do I marry them together? And so as I'm kind of conceptualizing, I'm like, well, a lot of the things I've already written about.
Yeah.
I've already written about Jomo. I've already written about, why can't I combine them into something that's tangible, that showcases Disney World, how it really is through the eyes of a marketer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the funny thing is as I wrote this all out, I sent it to Barry, who's been on your show before.
Yeah.
Barry Jacobson, who's former exec of Disney and who's been on my podcast. And he said, Barry, what do you think of this? And he goes, oh my God, this is better than some of the stuff that they teach at Disney Institute. And then Barry's wife's like, how does he know all this stuff? He never worked at Disney. And so I knew then that this book would be a home run.
Yeah.
And people would just love it. But the title I changed because it was originally called Marketing, or it was called The Magic of Marketing. And I thought, that's stupid. You know, it's basically Disney is the master of marketing. So why not put that first? Yeah. And but then, you know, going through having a cover design, my artist was like, Rob, what do you think of this? I'm like, no, copyright infringement. No.
Yeah.
And I said, no, you got to tweak the ears a little. You got to do this. I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we went through this, but if you've ever been to Disney and maybe you didn't catch it, maybe it's subliminal, drive through and look at the signs. The old signs were purple and red.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now they're changing them to blue, which I don't really like. But
no, not a fan.
We get very angry.
When you talk about that first trip in 1985 and your subsequent trips when you were younger, are there specific magical moments that you remember when you were younger that really stood out and made that impact? Like, whoa, this is magic. How do they do that?
Well, you know, the very first ride that I fell in love with was Pirates of the Caribbean. Still my favorite. I have to go on it every time I go there, sometimes twice. And the one time I went, we did it after our hours. I think it was Halloween where they handed out all the candy.
Yeah.
And I must have gone on Pirates 7 times. And it was just, and during that period, they have, you know, live people inside the queue. And it's just, for me, it was just, this is just awesome. Truth be told, I probably would make a lousy cast member. I'm very sarcastic, so I'd probably last 5 minutes. And so
you could be a Jungle Cruise skipper.
Everybody get out. I know we're on that Trader Sam's, not even close. Get out. No, I'd probably be fired. No, but my very first experience, and we had a character breakfast. This was when I was 16. My parents took me down. We had a character breakfast lined up, which is now paddlefish, but back then it was just a boat that did character breakfast.
Sure.
And so every time I go to Disney Springs, my wife's like, "Oh yeah, you're going to tell us about your story." And she's like, you know, and she looks at that going, you know, we have never been to paddlefish. So, you know, it's the story that she hears every time we pass paddlefish, but we've never eaten them. You know, but one of the restaurants I do love at Disney Springs is Raglan Road, and I think it's one of the best. Yeah. You know, but I think the best character breakfast, my opinion, is Crystal Palace at Magic Kingdom. But you got to get there early, and as soon as you're done eating, you got to get in line for rope drop as soon as you can.
Right.
And but by the time you scarfed all the food down at Crystal Palace, you can't move for a half hour. So. But one of our magical experiences, and this was just a few years ago, we were dining at Trails End at Fort Wilderness. Right. And my youngest daughter is a vegan. And so we asked, this is before Trails End changed everything. Before that, they used to have, you know,
The fried chicken, all
they had everything, buffet, everything. So it was, the chef had come out and talked to my daughter about her vegan needs. And he just kept bringing food after food after food. I'm like, wow. And he brings this dessert that, no kidding, probably about 3 foot tall. I mean, just, and my daughter just started crying, and she was just so happy. She was overjoyed. And to me, that takes the Disney experience to the next level.
Yeah.
You know, when the chefs care that much that they are going to prepare, you know, awesome food for you.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not saying it doesn't happen all the time, but I'm just saying that there are caring cast members that will go above and beyond to make your stay special.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know? And so those are the stories that really stick into my mind. I remember, I think it was the first or second time I took my kids to Disney. My son at the time got to drive the Jungle Cruise, and he was 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
They selected, hey, you get up here. And I mean, he was just beaming the joy he had. And those are the experiences that you only need one of those during a trip to Disney to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And you will forget all the money you spent.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
But for me, I've been all over the world. I've traveled to Germany and France and all these. I always come back to Disney World. That's my happy place. That's the place that gives me the magic. And I, like I said, I feel like I'm 16 again. And so when you can take those experiences, bring them back into your business, showcase how you do things, you know, all your customers will be amazed.
You have a chapter later in the book, and I love this because one, I have an ornament of a Polynesian trash can, and then I have a T-shirt, perhaps from in the T Public realm of a Hollywood Studios trash can. So but you talk about the design element and the customer experience and design, and we don't get to talk about that too much on there and how those things are connected. So I thought maybe you could provide some insight on that.
Well, it was funny as I was writing the book. I sent it to my buddy Scott Gray, who has taken me into Club 33 many times. And Scott says, "Well, you're missing some things." I said, "What are you talking about? What am I missing?" He said, "Well, I think you need a chapter on the trash cans. I think you need a chapter in Walt's philosophy." I'm like, all right, you son. Now I'm gonna add more stuff. And so I spent another week and I rewrote some stuff but yeah, the trash cans, if you think about what Walt did early on, he didn't want gum in the parks because it gets on your shoes and you find gum everywhere now. But he wanted trash cans every 12 feet or so. But he wanted them. And maybe this is something later on, but the trash cans needed to be themed to the environment. You didn't want regular trash cans everywhere.
Right.
And so, and I'm not trying to compare Disney World to other, parks. But other parks don't have, the Walt factor. They didn't have that early on customer appreciation or the cleanliness. So when you talk about these trash cans, they have to be in areas that maybe don't always look like it's a trash can. But you walk 12 feet and there's another trash can. And so you go down Main Street, you go down, into the center of right in front of Disney, right in front of the castle, and trash cans everywhere. You just don't really notice. They're out of the way until you actually need them. And the trash cans in Tomorrowland look different than the ones in Adventureland. Which is pretty cool. And you know, to me, it was those little details that really make the difference. And a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to do Keys of the Kingdom and go underneath the tunnels and you know, you got to see where the characters appear and disappear because you never see certain characters in certain areas because Walt didn't want that. He said in Disneyland it had to happen because the park wasn't you know, conceived so that characters disappeared.
Yeah.
But he spent time to make sure that everything in Disney World was not only magical, but in a sense that you never saw, you know, Jack Sparrow in a different land.
Yeah.
You know, and it was funny because 2 years ago I was just walking and having fun, and I had saw Jack, you know, down a ways, and I went, "Hey, Jack," and I just started walking. I didn't even pay. Next thing I knew, he's right next to me.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, can I take a selfie?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I'm like, you know, here I am in my 50s still.
Oh yeah.
Overjoyed that this character would take its time to pose with me, and friends are like, "Rob, you just I don't understand this kid in you."
Yeah.
Like, you have to be a kid.
Yeah.
No, and you talk about legacy, and I was drawn because the Tonys were last weekend that we're recording this, but people were talking about quotes from Hamilton, and you know, one of them is about legacy, and legacy, you know, is what is that? It's planting seeds that you never get to see, you know, grow, or however the quote goes. But those trash cans and those details and things, they like, when people are walking through, they don't realize like those are all seeds being planted in your brain, creating a bigger memory than you realize. And that's such an important element that, you know, we've talked to designers and things like that over the years where, you know, obviously you're trying to create a fully, you know, cliched word, immersive experience, but it is things like that, you know, that's really creating that legacy.
This time around, I did take some time, and I stopped over at Tom Sawyer's Island, and I took some pictures, and because this is the last year for it, and I know that, you know, nostalgia plays a big role in what Disney World does to try to bring you in, but also on the flip side, Walt said this park is always evolving. Okay, so. Yes, I'm going to be sad that an original section of the park that came from 1971 is going to be destroyed to make way for Cars Land, which they could have put in where the cars are already. But that's a tangent I want. But here's the thing: is that Disney, like everybody else, looks at the numbers. I look at numbers every day. And if people aren't going on that ride, if people aren't going into that area, if they've just lost interest, they're going to replace it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not the fault of Disney saying, yeah, look, you know what? We're just going to do this to do this. No, they know that people just aren't interested in Tom Sawyer's Island. And they don't get it. They don't, it's 50 years old. You know, my generation loves it. My kids have no idea who it is. Why go there?
Yeah.
So, you know, yes, take it out, get something a little bit more up to date. Same with the Tiana's ride. I loved Splash Mountain. That was nostalgic for me because I grew up with it.
Yeah.
But again, kids today have no idea.
No idea.
So, you know, you're looking at everything from a fishbowl perspective and saying, look, the magic has to evolve.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you know, I'm older, you know, the things that I like aren't going to appeal to the younger people.
Yeah.
So you have to update constantly.
Yeah.
You know, Guardians is a prime example of taking an old building and making it newer.
Right.
The failed attempt to make the galactic thing that they did, the Star Wars, I thought was a brilliant conception.
Right.
It just took a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
People weren't, maybe the curiosity was there, the FOMO was there at the very beginning, but it started to wane because it was a price tag, and it was also COVID and just a lot of things. And to me, it was people say, well, Rob, it was a failure. No, it wasn't. It was an immersive thing that they tried.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is that I was reminded to this from Barry, and he said one of his bosses would always say, "What if? What if?" And so maybe I don't always ask myself, "What if?" But what if I could create something that people want to read? And so I continue to write these books.
Right.
What if Disney created something that was truly immersive? And I look at Disney Quest was one of those things that I thought was brilliant. And we would go to Disney Springs, go to Disney Quest.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't like it. They didn't want to go. They just and so a lot of times people are focused on, we just need to go to the parks. 4 parks. Let's wear ourselves out, fly back home.
Yeah.
Look, there's more to Disney World than just 4 parks.
Yeah.
Or there's 2 water parks. There's everything that's the immersive world of Disney World.
Yeah.
And people forget about that. And a lot of the marketing that even Disney does is focused on the rides.
Yeah.
Yep. Why don't they focus on everything else?
Yeah.
I love the giant statues of characters at Art of Animation.
Right.
So when I'm walking through and I see Ursula that's 3 stories tall, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Those are the things that impress me.
Yeah.
That you don't see a lot in the marketing.
Right.
So but they are getting better.
Yeah.
They're starting to realize that, people want to be treated not necessarily special, but they just want to have that unique experience when they're there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. To that point, I did see on LinkedIn this morning that you had said Disney doesn't just sell tickets, they sell transformation, which I think we can agree with.
Right.
Why, especially that you've worked with so many other businesses too, why do you think it's so important to create those feels and those vibes and all of it for Disney, but also for other businesses as well?
It's when I go back to my carpet cleaning days, most of my clients were women. And when you're a man going into a home that's run by a woman, you have to be kind. You have to be non-intimidating. You have to drop your guard. You have to make them feel like you're coming into their home and it's the most unique experience that they're ever going to have.
Yeah.
But you're also not going to nickel and dime them to death.
Yeah.
That is the same experience that Disney does to a point. Everything they want to transform you out of your past environment and come into this Disney bubble to forget all your problems.
Yeah.
They want you to be, and I'm not going to say vulnerable. I don't like that word. They want you to feel that, you're in this magical realm, and it does. You have to be transformed, and you have to be willing to let it transform you. Because I've seen so many families, the first thing that they're going to do is complain about money, complain about, oh my God, I didn't get a dash pass. I get it. I'm sorry. They complain about everything. And we as customers, we as people that are coming into this park, yes, we are spending a lot of money, but we have to welcome that transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people are like, well, they just grumble through the whole thing. Yeah. And I look at people, because Disney's if you think about it, it's a master class in consumer behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at everybody that goes through and point out the problems. You're there on vacation. Yeah. Let the transformation happen.
Yeah.
And so Disney needs to do things, I think, that are a little bit above and beyond. And I get it sometimes. And I've gone to Disney in August. I hate going in August, but I went there, blazing hot. Even the cast members are a little disgruntled because they're hot, they're bothered. They don't even want to hear from you. Mm-hmm. And all they hear is complaints all day long. But you get somebody in January, and they're just so excited because it's 50 degrees out and they're cool, and they will answer your questions all day long. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love to do, I love to look at name tags and see where they're from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they're from Pennsylvania, oh yeah, I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
And when you can connect to these cast members mm-hmm. as a human, not as a disgruntled, overheated person who's figures that they're spending all their money.
Yeah.
You come into these parks and you embrace these people.
Yeah.
They're going to be friendlier. They're going to give you advice. They might even give you something special. Mm-hmm. I've talked to them and hey, Rob, okay, we're going to get you on this ride right away. Okay, great. Just treat them like a human being.
Yeah.
But I that is the problem with a lot of people. Their expectations are so high mm-hmm. that they don't have a good time.
Yeah.
For me, it's that kid in the candy store, attitude that when I come there, it's whatever I can do.
Yeah.
I can do.
Yeah.
If the people mover line is too long, I'll go, to Carousel Progress.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think people get to the point where they're like, my daughter was just down there last week with the kids. I said, did you get on this ride? She said, no, the line was like 50 minutes. Mm-hmm. 50 minutes on that ride. Like, what else are you going to do? I remember waiting 3 hours for Flight of Passage, and she wants to pass it up for 50 minutes.
Like, no, bonus.
It's a week.
Yeah.
I didn't train you this way.
Yeah, I think it's a funny thing, just in terms, and social media generates so many opinions. So I know it probably leaves them a little frazzled, but that emotional connection is lost sometimes. You can't really quantify that. People want to see, I want to see all the rides I'm getting on for my buck, but it's like, there's so much more.
And I used to think like that too early on. I'm spending all this money. I want to get on all the rides. And I think that's why Disney did the whole Lightning Lane and the Premier Pass.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not shelling out another $400 to get
right.
A couple more rides in. Mm-hmm. I can do it on my own because I've done it so many times. I know the secrets to get to this ride to this ride. And, but I understand. Okay, it's people's first time there. They don't want to miss out on any of the magic. They're just going to shell out more money.
Yeah. It's definitely, and it's a slippery slope. It's a high wire act. It's all the things that I think Disney especially coming out of the pandemic, has tried to navigate. I said Galaxy's Edge before, but I knew you meant the Galactic Star Cruiser. Like, I think that's a big example. You know, even getting a lightsaber, I put that off for years until I was like, no, I want the experience. I really realized, like, it's the experience I want, and that's what I'm going to pay for. The object is you know, a bonus. It's not the thing. You know, and those you got to have those conversations with yourself.
This is the first year that I actually experienced a cheeseburger spring roll.
Oh yeah.
Spring roll. And I thought, oh my goodness, where have you been all my life? These are awesome.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with the cheeseburger pods over in Pandora. You know, I know people will go crazy about certain desserts. The gray stuff they can keep. I don't. But there's certain things that, and you know, and I look at some of these Disney influencers that go out with their cameras every day, and there's a few I like, a few that I think that, you know, should only do Disney, not the other parks. But I think sometimes they focus too much on the parks. Focus on other stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I love doing mini golf at Disney World. You know, and people are like, well, there's mini golf? Yeah, there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
Like, I never saw it. And
you
know, or I love resort hopping. See what the next resorts, you know, have. It's not just about the contemporary Polynesian or Grand Floridian that are in the monorail line. Go off and experience the other ones.
Yeah.
Caribbean Beach and Art of Animation, and just walk through the lobbies and see the artwork, and people don't realize that it's there. And you know, I mentioned Club 33. You know, that is the most exclusive club at Disney World. Yeah. You know, unless you want to go to Golden Oak and buy a multi-million-dollar home and live there. Yeah. I don't think that's ever going to be on my bucket list. If I could live at Disney, that's where I'd go. You know? And there are people that, you know, and my wife and I were in line on Tiana's waiting to get on, and the people in front of us, I think everybody in front of us, even men, had these lounge fly.
Oh yeah.
You know, pocketbooks or whatever they're called now, purses, or carry-ons, and every single one of them filled with pins. Yeah. I've never traded a pin in my life. But that is part of the magic. Yeah. You know, you go there, you got your pins, you got your lounge flies, you got, you know, your hats and your merch and everything else. And it's the experience that you get. And then taking that experience and say, okay, how can I, as a business owner, do the same thing? What can I do differently? And Disney stands out because they're unique. They're bold. Yeah. You know, they have this vision. They have this legacy. Okay, but what can me as an entrepreneur do that's different, that's bold? Yeah. And so that was in a nutshell, that was why I wrote the book. And
no, it's really, and that's, I mean, you summed it up perfectly right there. I think is that it has this, you can transfer what Disney has structured and has stuck to and created this legacy for into whatever else, you know, whatever venture you want to take. And that's what really took me about the book too. And the fear versus the joy. I mean, I think that is in anything, right? It's am I going to be afraid of this thing to the point that I can't do anything about it, or am I just going to go for it and find joy in it? And you know, and I know that's where we started, but you know, I can't recommend the book enough. Marketing the Magic: Behind the Scenes Business Strategies from Walt Disney World. Rob, I mean, if you can, just give us an idea of where we can find you and connect with you.
Well, you can get the book along with all my other books at getrobsbooks.com. I mean, you can find Marketing the Magic on Amazon. It'll take you there. My company is anspachmedia.com, and you know, we help everybody with their marketing. We help them with podcasting and publishing their own books. And you know, you can just call me and talk about Disney all day long. And I'd be fine with that too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of friends that go to Disney, I'm the first one they call and I say, Rob, I'm here. What do I do next? So
Awesome.
yeah, I just love it.
Well, Rob, thanks again. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Hopefully maybe we can do it again soon. You never know.
And you guys are always welcome on my podcast, which is called E-Heroes.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can find time for that as well. Rob, thanks so much for joining us.
See ya.